So how many podcasts have you been on? Do you know?
I was on 18 last week. So I had to guess. I mean, my friend always shoots me for overestimating the numbers. I'm going to be pessimistic here. If I had to guess, I mean, I think we met like when I was starting my run. Like, I think you were podcast number like 10 or something. Like, that's how early I think our show was. I think I've been on 400 or 500 at this point.
Wow.
That's probably what the number is now.
So based on all that, would you say that you're successful?
The Tom Screen podcast is owned and made possible by Ethical Marketing Service. If your business is struggling with Google or Facebook ads, maybe you're frustrated figuring it out or there's a performance issue, Ethical Marketing Service has worked on hundreds of accounts and we can help in this area. We offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, and for every direct account we look after, we sponsor a child in a developing nation with food, water and education. If you would like to find out if we can help, it's a free, no salesy consultation call, and the link is in the description. Enjoy the episode.
Our returning guest today is the founder of MasterTalk. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become the top 1% of communicators in their industry. He has a popular YouTube channel called MasterTalk with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. A big welcome to Brenden Kumarasamy.
Hey, great to be on, Thomas. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again.
It is my pleasure. As you be a returning guest, I'd like to start with, who are you?
Who am I? I mean, I guess I'm a regular Joe like everyone else, but I think what I am is probably a man with purpose. You know, I remember the first time we did this, I wasn't really sure what MasterTalk was at the time. I was just making videos in my mother's basement, and I just started making them better. But I think now, you know, the mission has evolved a lot into how do we make every human being on earth a great communicator. So I would say I'm a guy with purpose, and I'm a guy who loves his family and who loves the people around him. That's my best shot at the question.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about that question is it's so open to interpretation. But thank you for the answer. The next one's going to be a bit more of an easy one. You ready?
Let's do it, man.
What's the meaning of life?
You're funny, man. I love this. Yeah. Okay. When you said questions were interesting, I didn't know they were this interesting. Okay, let's jump in. So I would say meaning of life, right? I think John Donaher explains this so well in an episode he did with Lex Friedman, which is this, Thomas. He says that the meaning of life is fascinating because we didn't even think about it until like 100 years ago. Like, because before that 100 years or 200 years, human beings didn't even think about the meaning of life because they were so focused on just surviving, making it the next day. Whereas because we've advanced so far as a species, we've gone to a place in our life where the meaning of life is now a question to even ask. So I think that's a fascinating point that he made. But the other piece to that is I fundamentally believe an answer to the question, a finite answer, like a clear answer, actually leads to sorrow and depression. Because if the meaning of life had a finite answer and you weren't that finite answer, then everyone who isn't that loses. It's kind of like the whole idea behind heaven and hell. Assuming those things exist, well, then what is the line between heaven and hell? If I kill someone, does that mean I go to hell? Or not that I have, obviously. Or if I stole 2 bars of candy instead of 5, does 3 bars mean I go to heaven and 2 bars mean to hell? So these finite definitions are what kills us. So essentially, my answer to the question, after giving all that context, Thomas, I don't think there is a meaning to life, but there is meaning if you choose to create it. So in my case, if you look at my life, I don't really think life has meaning. I'm not super religious, but I think for me, it's all about, okay, well, while I'm still here in playing this game for a set period of time, I might as well just create my own.
So what's your meaning?
I love it, man. So this is something I've wrapped my head around a lot, and I'm happy to tell you mine. And it requires a bit longer, so I'll go for a few minutes on a little monologue here. So I was watching a TikTok the other day, Thomas, and the TikTok, it starts with Taylor Swift winning this award. Okay, don't worry, this leads to something. So bear with me for a little bit. So basically, the TikTok is about her winning an award, which is Woman of the Year by an organization called Billboard. That's like a music company. So she stands up on the podium, right? It's 2014. And she talks, for 20 minutes, but the TikTok shortens the last 30 seconds of her speech. And the last 30 seconds sounds something like this. Your future Woman of the Year is in a choir somewhere, is 11 years old. She's playing piano for the first time, and her dream is to be a singer, to be a musician. And we need to take care of her. And then the TikTok flips, like for the last kind of couple of seconds. And then a few years go by, and Billie Eilish wins Woman of the Year. She's like the youngest inductee in the history of Billboard. She's 17 years old and she wins. And she gets up on that stage and she's got like all of these fancy clothes, her weird like shades. And she gets on and she just says something like, oh my God, like every other inductee is like super successful. And I don't know how I got this award, but thanks, Billboard. And then the last 30 seconds of the speech, that's what really changed my life, Thomas. It really gave me an ability to explain my purpose to other people. And the last 30 seconds, she said, Taylor Swift really stole the show 7 years ago, but I kind of summarized what she said, which is the following. In 2014, when she gave her speech around the Future Woman of the Year, I was 11 years old. And I was starting choir for the first time, and I was learning to play piano. So the only thing I have left to say, Billboard, is thank you for taking care of me. And she walks off stage. And when I heard that TikTok, I know it's super random, Thomas, but I think why it's so vital to my life purpose is I thought about who's taking care of the next geniuses of our society. When Elon Musk was 15 years old, Thomas, nobody gave a shit about him. Nobody cared who Elon Musk was. He was born in South Africa. He moved to Canada to do his university degree there, but nobody cared because he hadn't won yet. So he didn't have any resources for communication. Nobody was helping him develop the skill, which I could still do today. And I thought about the next Elon Musk right now during our conversation we're having right now. There's a 15-year-old girl or boy who is the next Elon Musk somewhere in the world. We don't know who it is, where they are, but I want to make sure to serve that person because nobody else is doing it. So my life purpose, my mission in life, my meaning is how do I create a world where every genius that's ever going to live in the human race is an exceptional communicator? Because if all of them were, the human race as a whole would advance at lightning speed. And that's really the reason why I live.
That is a fantastic answer.
That I wouldn't have been able to give you last time I was on the show. Because it's evolved.
Thank you for sharing it.
For sure, brother.
It touched on something which we spoke about before recording, which was your very active podcast guesting. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your approach?
100%, brother. So let's start with principles, right? So principles is self-awareness is the key, right? To understanding how to be successful in life. And self-awareness to me, because I feel it's not well understood. I know Gary Vee talks a lot about it, but there's not much like granular definition here. Is I think a human being who is self-aware understands their strengths as well as their weaknesses equally. So in the same way, I could tell you how great I am at XYZ, and we'll talk a little bit about that as to why I like podcast guesting as a medium. But the other piece is also understanding what I'm shit at. And I'll give you a couple of examples right now. Can't sing. I won't be able to get drafted to the NBA. I'll never be a basketball player, professionally anyways, maybe in my backyard, but never that. Or when it came to YouTube, I never edited a single video in my life. I suck at editing. I hate the camera thing, like putting a camera and doing all that stuff. So understanding that, how, like being very self-aware about all of my weaknesses as much as my strengths allows me to hire out effectively. So going back to podcast guesting, what I realized is at the end of the day, to share my message with MasterTalk, there's many ways to do it, right? You can go on TikTok, you can do all of these 100 different tactics. But I realized that helped the most is podcast guesting because that's the medium I shine at. Podcast guesting, YouTube videos, and like keynote speeches are probably the three mediums where I feel I'm world class at. So instead of waiting on the algorithm to save me, right? I think the last time I was on your show, I think I had like 2,000 subscribers or something really low. I just said like, wait a second, if I just am the world's most guested podcaster, even if the show is super tiny, as long as they care to interview, they care about the topic. If I just do 2,000 podcasts or 1,000 podcasts a year, and I develop a raving fan base, like people who genuinely know me because we're having a deeper conversation, and you'll always know me. Well, if I have 5,000 of these people, regardless of their podcast size, if they just share my YouTube channel with 10 people, I'll have 50,000 subscribers, I'll still win. Right. So I think the key is I just realized that podcast guesting was the most efficient medium because like I just feel I'm better than most communication coaches at this. And then the other piece is it's a numbers game. You just meet a lot of people, you build friendships instead of like being transactional. Like I've never gotten a client from you. It's not about that. It's about like building the friendship, the relationship. But when you've been on like 10,000 shows, which will be the case for me in like 10 years, like you're done. You're going to be like Gary Vee, and everyone's going to, those 10,000 people will share it with 100 people, and you have 1 million subscribers, and you're done, right? So yeah.
So how many podcasts have you been on? Do you know?
I was on 18 last week. So I had to guess. I mean, my friend always shoots me for overestimating the number, so I'm going to be pessimistic here. If I had to guess, I mean, I think we met like when I was starting my run. Like I think you were podcast number like 10 or something. Like that's how early I think our show was. I think I've been on 400 or 500 at this point.
Wow.
That's probably what the number is now. Probably, but I don't really know, to be honest, brother. I don't know.
It'd be nice to know that metric though, no?
Yeah. And then the other piece that I wanted to add to that, I forgot, is also balancing your strengths and weaknesses with what you genuinely like. Like this, I genuinely like this. It's not like, oh my God, I have to talk to Thomas. It's like, yeah, like I haven't seen Thomas in like a year and a half. And it's a great way for me to keep in touch with people. Right. So it's fun for me. Whereas other people who are more introverted, and you're right, I should probably get the stat behind that. There's other people who wouldn't like this, who'd be like, oh my God, podcast guesting is not for me. I'd rather just like make more videos on other socials. So I think it's really understanding your strengths. And it also goes back to what you do in life. Like think about me, I'm in the coaching space, right? There's pros and cons to that. The pro is, high margin business. You don't need a lot of clients to make multiple 6, multiple 7. So it's very easy for you to make a living if you're great at it. But there's a con. And the con is you got to really love people. You got to really be energetic. And if you don't like people, you can never do well in this business. So it's about understanding even the game that you're playing. And that's where self-awareness is key. So if someone's really good at coding and they're really introverted, they shouldn't be a coach, right? They should, or be a podcast guest. They should be like an engineer at Microsoft and make $300,000 a year, right? So it's all about understanding who we are and what we want to do.
So based on all that, would you say that you're successful?
Fascinating question. I didn't expect this conversation, Thomas. Really putting me on the spot today. I would say this is a tricky one because what is success at the end of the day? I think for me personally, I am successful because my metrics of success are probably very different than most people. Like even today, I still live with my mother, right? Like what am I, 26? I have a successful business now. I still live with her because I want to spend more time with her. It keeps my burn rate low. And I know we're entering recession, so I got to be smart with my cash flow. But I think the other piece to that is for me, success and how I defined it when I was like 19, it still is the same today. It's just changed a little bit, was making 50 grand a year. Right. So the second I was making 50 grand a year, which was like a long time ago, I was super happy. And I think a lot of happiness is expectation, right? In the sense of, if we have a certain expectation, like I want to buy a Ferrari, let's say, I don't personally, but let's say that is the goal and you haven't bought it, there's going to be a delta of unhappiness there. But the other piece, Thomas, is going like, if you really ask yourself the hard questions to figure out what you're happy with, then you're successful. And for me, the definition of my own success is having enough money to sustain MasterTalk in my living standard, which is the money I'm currently making. So I'm good with that. And the second piece, which I didn't have last time we talked, and I do now, is because I had a corporate job before in our first conversation, was being able to use every minute of every day doing exactly what I want to be doing. Like every meeting I look at my calendar, even if I work a ton, I look forward to it. So I start my day, go, yes, I get to start with the conversation with Thomas, then I get to do this, then I get to do that. But in corporate, you don't get that luxury. But I could have been making way more money in corporate had I stayed there. It's not the case anymore, but when I made the decision to quit, that was the conundrum that I had to face. So yes, I do believe I am successful. And now the goal is really bonus at this point.
So what was it like to leave?
Hardest decision of my life, brother. hardest decision of my life. And the reason had nothing to do with money. What had happened was, I would say in like late 2020, that's when my business started getting traction purely by accident. And I had nothing to do with YouTube, actually. I still lose money on my YouTube channel. The benefit, because that's mostly to give back to society, right? I'm only starting to make money now from it. It was Clubhouse. Clubhouse was actually the reason I was able to quit corporate, because I was super early on Clubhouse, and as you could probably tell, since I like to talk a lot, Clubhouse was like my medium. So I got on there and I just bled on Clubhouse. I think I was like 8-10 hours a day on Clubhouse. It was nuts, like in the
Wow.
earliest of days with my friend Billy, and that's how I got a bunch of clients from that 90-day window. That's when I was able, now it's useless, but those 90-day windows was key. So essentially what happened was I had a standstill in like May 2021, where I'd replaced 50% of my income, and I was in a promotion cycle with IBM, and I had to call to make, because I was working like 90-100 hours a week. I was doing a corporate job that was paying me really well, but I was working 70 hours a week. I was doing MasterTalk for 30, and I was barely surviving for the other hours that I was like awake. So I had to make a tough call. And the reason it was so hard for me was because my whole life, my identity was tied to getting a corporate job. That was really my exit into riches, which it was for me. And I had to give up that identity to pursue MasterTalk full time. So it was very challenging. And honestly, the only reason I was able to do it was because of my business partner, who's double my age. He's got a lot more wisdom than me. He's still my personal coach, and he's a lot more mature. And he's the one who saved me 3 to 5 years of my life. When I should have been quitting at 28 or 30 years old, I was able to quit corporate at 25 and make it work.
So nervous before handing in the letter, or were you confident?
Dude, I was pissing my pants. I honestly felt that like the day before I was planning on quitting. I'd planned the coup for 2 months. And don't get me wrong, I was like saying this as a caveat. I loved my job. Like IBM was a great company. I know a lot of people like shit on their corporate job. I really enjoyed it. I think it was just a matter of where am I investing my time now. And the day before, I honestly felt when I would give my resignation, I know it sounds bizarre, I felt they would say like, you're not allowed to leave. Like you can't leave. Like I honestly felt like some part was like, oh, I can't leave. Like I saw the contract. So when I quit, I remember I had a call. I don't think I've ever shared this. I was on a call. It was like June 11th or something. No, sorry, it was like May something. Excuse me. I got a call with my manager, and I just said, hey, I'm leaving. Like I'm leaving IBM. I'm giving like a 6-week notice, which was like insane. Nobody gives 6-week notices. I just wanted to leave on good terms because they became a client after, right? Like 6-week. Like, and I was like, okay, I'm leaving the, job. I'm going to pursue this thing. And I literally thought he was going to say, oh my God, like it's game over. Like you can't leave. And the guy just said, hey man, really sad to see you go. You're definitely one of the top employees at the company in our department, but you should go pursue your dream. And every person I got on a call with, the head of North America for IBM, like everybody was like, Brenden's leaving. You can't leave this company. But then when I told them what I was doing, they said, hey man, I think you should really pursue this. I've been watching YouTube videos for like 9 months, because all the executives knew I'd made YouTube videos. They just didn't know it was a business. And they said, hey, I think you're doing something really important. It's like I was making prank videos. So all of them supported me, and they made sure I had clients as I left. And I said, oh my God, like I could do this. Like people actually want to see me win at this. And then I was able to. And then after I replaced all of my income, which took around 90 days, then at that point I was flying. And now I can't even believe the life I have. Honestly, I'm really grateful.
Well, 90 days is impressive. Do you think you probably could have done it before then?
I could have. Honestly, I could have. It's just the reason I had quit. Because remember, Thomas, I had replaced half of my income. Because remember, I want to make it clear. The goal wasn't 300,000 to quit my corporate job. The goal is like 50. If I can make 50, I'm good. Because I live with my mom, right? Like it's fine. Right? I don't have a mortgage. I mean, we pay it all together now. Like I have very little risk. The only risk I had, which is no longer a risk, but at the time it was I was the only breadwinner in the family. Like my sister wasn't working. I paid for all of her education with my IBM salary. I paid off all of her family debt with the money I was making from corporate. And my mom's on a pension, right? I didn't want to work anymore because she had worked in a factory in her life. And for once in her life, she could have a break because she was in poverty for most of it. So I was really stressed about leaving my corp job. Like I was like, oh my God, how am I supposed to replace 73K, which is what I was making at IBM? And I was like, okay, this is stressful, but you're absolutely right. I think what happened was when I'd replaced like 36K or something, I just said, wait a second, 10 clients just gave me 36K. If I just get, and they all love me, like it's like I'm a shitty coach. They were like, yeah, we'll refer like 2 other people to you or whatever. I was like, oh, like if all of them refer one other person, like I'll have replaced all of it, even with no effort, even in not guesting on any podcast, like not doing anything. So I was like, yeah, I got this, and that's when things started to work. But you're right, I could have done it 6 months ago. But I also think like before I'd quit. So I'd quit in June 2021, but you're right, I probably could have quit early Jan. But I think the lesson is everyone's got our own kind of cycle, but the best way to move quickly in life is honestly like to always question your beliefs. Because if Vamsi wasn't there, I probably would have stayed in that corporate job for another 3 years, right? Before doing this full time.
Well, congratulations for everything that you've achieved in that time. It's very impressive.
Oh, thank you.
You touched on fear. What would you say your greatest fear is now?
Greatest fear for me now, which is completely left field that you probably would expect, is honestly romantic relationships. Like I think the reason I've had some success in my life, and I'm still learning and growing, right, from people like you and people around me, is I learned from people who had done life before. Like when I was 20, I don't know if I told you this last time, but a lot of my success came from a guy named Lewis Howes, who's the host of the School of Greatness podcast. So when Lewis was getting started, that's when I started listening to podcasts. So I was listening to his show from episode 1. I actually just finished an episode this morning before I even got on this call. So I'm always listening to people. And what I learned from Lewis and just watching his life and other people like him is health and wealth is really easy to optimize if you're serious. If you're serious. Okay, there's a caveat. That means like for wealth, okay, yes, I get it. Totally empathetic. The average income in the UK or in the US is probably 50,000. But given that caveat, 70% of people drink beer. Like a lot of people have pets. You don't need to have these things, right? Not to say like I'm against all of that, but there's a way to optimize your wealth, unless you get unlucky. But there's a way to do it. Like it's just people aren't willing to downgrade their lifestyle. This is just my personal opinion. But anyways, basically what I'm saying is if you make 50 and you live on 30, you can be wealthy, right? You can figure it out. So that's what I did. When I was making 70K, I was living off 30. That's how I had like a 9-month emergency fund when I left IBM. But anyways, I'm getting to a point here. The second piece is health. Look, health is easy to optimize if you're serious about it. Once again, have accountability buddies, run every day, eat an avocado, like pistachios, and just don't eat the shit that people tell you like to eat, like McDonald's, like you skip that. Yeah, like soft drinks, skip that. But relationships, my friend, that is the conundrum, the puzzle I have yet to solve. And the reason is every person I've admired in my life has gotten that wrong, as per my definition, which is to have one healthy relationship with children and being happy, or at least somewhat happy with that individual for 40 years. Every genius of our society, a large percentage, except maybe like Richard Branson, has like messed that up. Like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Lewis Howes. So it's created a lot of fear. So I've actually never dated. I'm only starting to now. And it's something I'm really worried about. And to some extent, less worried than I used to be about will I ever find that person. So I think my rationale now, my strategy, and I'm happy to share it with you. You know me, I'm super open head, and I'm still figuring it out, honestly. For me, the strategy now is get to a place financially with MasterTalk where I'm guaranteed success. So I'm doing well, but I'm not guaranteed yet. I want to get into those bigger numbers, like probably like $500,000, like get into that level where it's like guaranteed at this point that I can't lose. And then at that point, then I'll probably, it's funny, I probably should say as a podcast, but I'll probably like stop doing business. Like I'll probably just stop with the clients I have and just do it recurring, close the business, just coach those 50 people, and honestly spend 80% of my life dating. And the reason I say that is because I don't want to wake up at 35, be a multimillionaire, and not have a family. I think that would be an ultimate failure. And knowing that at 26, I think gives me an advantage because I have 9 years to make this work because I only need to find one person. But that's the greatest fear that I have right now since you asked.
Thank you for the honesty. It's very transparent.
Of course, man.
And great answer and very insightful as well.
Of course.
So the next one is completely random, even more random than the prior questions.
Sure.
So let's say you go outside for a moment, you notice something sort of glistening in the grass, you pick it up and sort of brush it off, and a blue genie sort of pops out of this lamp that you found and says, "Thank you for releasing me. I will grant you 3 wishes." Now, you can't wish for more wishes, can't bring back anyone from the dead, and you can't make anyone fall in love with you. What are your 3 wishes?
Interesting constraints. Okay, so I've heard the question before, but I've never heard the constraints except the unlimited wishes one. That's as you said, I can't wish for bringing someone back from the dead, and I can't wish for someone to fall in love with me. Okay, fascinating. Okay, I would say the first wish is to have an unlimited amount of money. That's probably the first wish. Because if I have an unlimited amount of money, I could just do crazy things. Like I could fund every crazy idea in the world without ever worrying about getting a return. That would be fascinating. But then it might devalue the value of money. But if I'm the only person who has unlimited money, I guess the money would still be super valuable. That'd probably be the first thing. I would just fund a bunch of crazy things. Like all crazy things. There wouldn't even be a limit. It would just be like we fund every crazy idea until we find all the Elon Musks. That would be the first wish. What would be the other 2? I'd probably need to spend more time thinking about it, but let me give you some impromptu stuff right now, and then I'll spend another half a day thinking about it, letting you know 2 years when I'm on it or something. What would be the other 2 things? So unlimited money would be one of them. The other thing I would wish for, not necessarily for someone to fall in love with me, but I would wish for like an app that helps you find your soulmate for everyone, not just me, but for like everybody. I think that would be interesting. There's like an episode. And by the way, I'm probably thinking, so I'm sure there's things you've thought about that I haven't thought of. So that would be the third wish. I'd probably collaborate with other people to figure out what wishes. But there's an episode in Black Mirror. You ever heard of that show, Black Mirror?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Right. So you've seen the episode. So there's an episode called Hang the DJ. And in Hang the DJ, it's basically this episode, for those who are listening, you probably have seen it, but people are listening, is like you get placed into a simulation, and the simulation helps you find the one, and like very efficiently. It's a fascinating app. And I think if that existed, it would make our lives so much easier. Because like you could like go through the app, see who's sexually attracted to you, go through the entire list, and just like the app just tells you. So you don't have to waste 10 years of like nonsense. You just find that person, you're done. So I think that would be super magical. That would be the second thing I'd wish you. Not just for me. I wouldn't keep that gift to myself. I would keep that for everybody. I think everyone should be given that. And what would be the third piece? I would say the third wish is probably, once again, I would probably change this later, but right now the third wish would probably be listening skills. If every human being had exceptional listening skills, no, I wouldn't make that my third wish. The third wish would be to be immortal. That would be the third wish.
It's so an that interesting answer.
Yeah.
The reason being is that one of my questions is if you could choose to be immortal, but the caveat is that you cannot die at all, would you take that option? That's on my list of questions.
I would. And the reason I would is because for me personally, everyone's different. And I'm sure you get different answers. But, one of my worries, Thomas, which I know is really bizarre, like some people, a very small percentage of the population, let me give context. This must sound really, actually, maybe your audience is bizarre, which is good. Is, what's interesting about Elon Musk, Thomas, is he doesn't think in the span of 100 years. He thinks in the span of 100 million years. So literally when he's on a podcast and he's talking, he literally says things like, the window for being a multiplanetary species might end. We don't know how long that's going to last. So I need to make sure we become a multiplanetary species before I die in the next 50 years. Or else what if in 200 years we don't have that window anymore? What if it's not possible to go to Mars? So just the fact that he's thinking that way is so it's so crazy, right? It's like totally out of the scope as of the regular human being on Earth, right? And I'm kind of similar. Even saying that puts me in a weird spot, but I'm kind of similar in the sense of my biggest worry is like there's been like 118 billion people who have been alive so far in human history, like 110, 120 billion. And I think I'm the first human being to be alive right now who actually cares about making every other genius for the rest of humanity exceptional communicators, except maybe like Dale Carnegie. Except I think the difference in me and Dale, but I can't know that for sure because I've never met Dale because he wasn't alive when I was alive, is the medium of technology before me that existed before didn't allow you to immortalize your ideas because you can only do it in books, basically, is what Dale did. I'm sure if Dale was in my era, right, he would have been like me, being on your podcast and talking to, maybe, who knows, but or maybe he would have been lazy, who knows. But I think the caveat is, my worry is if I die, which is going to happen, right, in 75 years or something, is the people after me, if they're not as generous as me, they're not going to coach the next Elon Musk for free when the person needs it for free because they can't afford it. And that's my biggest worry. So if I was immortal, I could just coach all of the Elons myself. And I would just develop an expertise. I would just be number one in the world forever, right? Because I could just live forever. So, and I just coach everyone myself. So that's why I would stay immortal.
So you'd be immortal and you'd have unlimited money.
Yeah. That would be the two. The third one, I don't even know what the third one was. I had to figure out what the third one was. Oh, yeah, the app. Yeah, I would love the app. I think that would be super amazing. It would just create
like
such
99.6% probability of you finding a match. That was the episode, I think.
I would exactly, but I would wish for it to be 100%. I think it would be it would be so cool. It would be such a gift, I think, to humanity.
Well, I've mentioned your transparency in some of your answers. The next one is, if everyone spoke their mind, would the world be a better place?
No, I don't think so. And I think the reason is because most human beings don't have that level of consciousness to deal with the truth. I think that's just the honest reality. I'll give you a personal example. My own mom. My mom is an incredible human being, right? She's amazing. Like I don't know how I got so lucky with her. But what I will say, and this is just me being perfectly honest, there's things that I don't tell her. And the reason I don't tell her is because I know she can't handle the stress and the pressure, because I know her too well. I'll give an example. Like just a month ago, like our sink, like a little pipe. Okay, water was just flooding. Like, who cares? Like, you just hire a plumber, $200, it's fixed. She was stressed out of her mind over that pipe that I spent $200 solving for. It took an hour, it was done. Like, you just hire somebody to do it. So all of my like things that I worry about, I never share any of those with my mother because I know she can't handle it. So I share that with other entrepreneurs doing 6, 7, 8 figures, and I go and I process my emotions with them, right? And I have those conversations. So the reason I mentioned that personal example is I definitely don't think most human beings, I think 99.9% of human beings can't handle the truth. I mean, I'll give you another simple one. I mean, since we're being honest, might as well give you a raunchy one. I mean, think about like women, right? How most of them don't have orgasms in bed because they're too afraid to tell their significant other, man or woman, right? That they're unhappy in that situation. But men can't handle the truth of the fact that you got to adapt. So just the fact that I mentioned that, I think puts me in a very, very small percentage of men in the world. Right. And that these are just weird, funny, random examples that come to mind that just showcase that the answer is definitely no.
Okay. It's a good one to think about in terms of the sharing of worries. So is it actually beneficial to conceal the truth in that particular instance? It's an interesting philosophical question. The next one is living life to the fullest possible?
Two parts to that. One part is I think fullest is the definition, right? Like, do I think I'm living life to the fullest? I like to think so. I mean, I get to be on podcasts, I get to do all these things, and I feel alive. I mean, you could tell I'm like super crazy and I'm alive. But if your definition of being full is living life to the fullest is having unmet expectations that you haven't achieved, you'll never live life to the fullest. So for example, if I wake up and I see my calendar and I go like, shit, I'm not on Joe Rogan this week, I'm not living life to the fullest. If that's my definition, then so it will be, right? But I think living life to the fullest just means living to the definition that you set for that constraint. So for me, I like to think, and there might be gaps there, But I like to think I'm living life to the fullest because I get to spend every minute of every day doing what I want to do. But there's definitely moments where I'm on sales calls with people who are just not a fit. And it's just like an annoying 20 minutes out of my life too. And they're just like really rude people. So I think there's like a balance where we find the expectation for living life to the fullest and we set it. But I think if those expectations are realistic and we're happy with that, I think there is an opportunity there to live life to the fullest for sure.
So the next one is there anything you should have let go of a long time ago, but you are still holding on to?
I feel like this is a therapy session for me, Thomas. Let me think. Is there something that I'm still holding on to? So I can give you a quick example of something I used to hold on to that I'm no longer anymore. Then as I'm talking about that, I'll start to think of something I'm still holding on to. So, for example, a lot of my success in my tens was because I always loved competing with my dad. I hated him my whole life. We lived in the same house for like 10 years. And the only way I forgave him was after he died. Right. And he was an alcoholic and all that stuff. So I never really liked him. So a lot of my success was because I was super aggressive. I was like, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's something I held on to. And honestly, I'm super grateful I did because that's what got me the level of success I did in my early 20s. This is long before MasterTalk started. It was mostly around getting the corporate job. But when he started to get a liver failure, I started realizing that his time was running out and that I had the wrong target. Like my whole life was really based on this idea that I was going to prove him wrong and everyone else wrong. And I wasn't able to move past that because the game was ending. Like I had won a long time ago. But I think what helped me heal and helped me let go of that was quote by Tony Robbins. I think he says it best. He says that if you're going to blame someone for all of your failures and all of the sadness and disasters in your life, you might as well blame them for the good too. And the hardest thing I had to admit in my life, actually, and has nothing to do with corporate life, is that my dad was the greatest gift I could ever ask for. Right. And it was really tough for me to get to that place, but it's true. Like if he had never immigrated from Sri Lanka to Canada, I wouldn't have been born in a first world country. If he didn't move to Montreal, I wouldn't have spoken 3 languages that I do today. If he didn't force me to learn French, I never would have went through the struggle of communicating a second language, which means I wouldn't be able to coach people in that way, which is something I think I'm one of the few coaches in the world who can do that. And because he moved to Montreal, I was able to go to Concordia, and Concordia had the world's largest case competition in the program in the world, which is where I learned how to speak. It's kind of like presentations for nerds, which led to MasterTalk. If he literally did not make the decision to immigrate, none of this would have happened, and I wouldn't be talking to you. And it was really hard for me to admit that is all of my success was because of him. The game that I pretended to play the entire time competing against him was a game he created. It was a game that was rigged from the beginning. It wasn't meant for a zero-sum game. It was a game for both of us to win. So I needed to change the story from I need to beat this person to he gave me the best opportunity to change the world and I better make sure I don't screw it up. Right? So when that happened, it created a lot of healing in my life. And of course, I think my dad is an amazing human being. He's not the worst dad ever that exists in the world. He's not the best either, but none of us are perfect. So that's probably one thing. 2 years ago, if you had asked me that question, that would have been my answer. Today, though, what's something that I need to let go that I'm still holding on to right now? I mean, it's tough to be honest, because I do a lot of inner work. But if I had to give an answer, because I always want to do your questions justice, Thomas, because they're great ones. It's probably limiting beliefs around finding the love of my life. That's probably what I would say. Is like even if I know internally I can make it work, because it's an output game. You date 500 people, and one of them will be that person. There's probably still something I'm holding on to that like some part of me that still thinks it's not going to happen. So that's probably something I need to let go. But I'll fix it out. I'm still young. I'll figure it out. But I'll throw it out there.
Again, a very insightful answer, and I think beneficial for anyone who has, should we say, parental issues. I don't think you're alone in that sense. So thank you for sharing it.
Of course, brother.
Next one on your inner voice. If your inner voice was an actual person, would you stay in touch with them?
Yes. My inner voice is like an assassin, right? It's someone who's like, kind of like Gary Vee in many ways, where like when he's at a Jets game, Like Jets, for those who are listening, it's like football, American football. So when he's at a game, he's like a different person. He's like yelling at old people. He's like telling them to die. It's like really funny. Actually, maybe it's not funny, but I should have said that. That's gonna get me in trouble. But it's like it's very authentic to him, right? Which I respect. Like I respect the authenticity, and I try and mirror that as much as possible. It's just most people don't ask me these questions, so I don't have an opportunity to be authentic in that way. But I think that authenticity is what creates the piece. And for me, the universe is like a cold-blooded killer. And what I mean by that is I don't mean in the literal sense. I mean in the sense that my inner voice is someone who'll do anything to win. And I love people like that. That's why I coach ambitious executives. I don't coach losers, right? I coach winners, like people who already won and who want to win bigger. Those are the people who light me on fire. Like, notice how I said Elon Musk. I didn't say like normal person at the grocery store, right? And there's nothing wrong with that person, but I think the inner voice for me is definitely someone I'd be best friends with, because we would just nerd out all the time and yell at people and have a great time.
Well, the interesting thing about that question is it says something about what's going on in that person's head. Because if you do say, I would go nowhere near that person, it tells you something. So it tells you something about, your inner voice must be pretty ambitious, cool guy.
Yeah, very ambitious, cool guy. But that's assuming people answer the question honestly, though, Thomas, right? Because I'm sure a lot of people, if given that question, they would probably lie, and they would probably say something like, "Oh, my inner voice is really kind," or some bullshit. So I think there's also that piece as well. Whereas I'm not like that at all.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask about what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind, but I kind of feel like you've answered that with your goals and what you're trying to aspire to do. So I'm going to go with an interesting definitional question. You're a communication guy, right? What is communication?
This is like the first question about communication. I would say communication is, like, this is my definition, is sharing an idea to a specific audience to achieve a specific outcome. So sharing an idea to a specific audience to achieve a specific outcome. And that specific audience could be an audience of one. It could be communicating with your significant other to get Chinese food instead of Mexican food that day. Or that key outcome could be, giving a boardroom presentation. You could be presenting on a podcast, having a conversation. But for me, communication is sharing an idea effectively enough to achieve a specific outcome for a specific audience. So that's the way I define communication. And everything I do around that shows if someone's a great communicator or not. So let me give a concrete example. Let's say someone wants to raise $10,000 for their nonprofit, and they're speaking to a room of 50 executives. Okay. And they're shit communicators. But if they raise the $10,000, I don't have any feedback for them. Because as for my definition of communication, they're great because they achieved the outcome that they wanted. But, and there's a big but, if their goal is 100,000 and they raised 57,000, now we have a delta. Now we have a gap between the goal that you set for your audience and what you actually achieved. So now we're going to tweak communication. And that business analogy also applies into a personal relationship. Let's say you take the relationship with children, right? Let's say it's your children. Maybe not to say you necessarily have children, but like, let's say someone who's listening does, right? In that context, it would be, what do you want that relationship to be? What's the goal? And if the relationship is average and plain, then you're a great communicator. But if you want the relationship to be like amazing, vivacious, like everyone's on point on the same, and if that's not the point, and you're not aligned there, then you need to improve your communication to reach that outcome.
Great answer. Have you heard anyone say any definitions that you disagree with or not a fan of regarding communication definitions?
I'll spin that question in a different way. I actually don't really follow that many communication experts. Like, I hate the academia side of communication. I don't like read books. I'm in a bachelor's accountancy degree. Like, I'm far from being a communication guy. I think it's more about, I'm a practitioner. That's the way that I live. In the same way, I like Gary Vee's analogy because I think me and him are similar, just in completely different ways. Like, he is very, like, he doesn't read books. He's more like, what works on the field, and let me just teach what works on the field. So same thing with me. So I actually don't know how other people define communication, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, if it's based on the outcome, right, then kind of makes sense. Is it better to be respected or liked?
Is it better to be respected or liked? I personally, if I had to choose, obviously I'd pick both because that's what I try and do. Be respected and be liked. Like hopefully we did that in the podcast where I balance both. Where it's like you see me as an expert, but you also kind of like, oh, this guy's not so bad. So, but if I had to pick one, it would definitely be respected. Because at the end of the day, if you're respected and people don't like you, they'll still take you seriously. But if people like you and they don't respect you, they won't take your ideas seriously. So I'd say for the goals that I have in life, it makes a lot more sense for my view of the world to be respected rather than liked. But my view of the world is not most people's view of the world. Like other people, the goal is survival. That's how our brain is wired. So being liked might be a more desirable outcome for most people than being respectful. But I would go with respectful personally.
Thank you for that. You mentioned that you are potentially going to be immortal, right, when you get your wishes. So the next one is, how would people change if the life expectancy was 500?
I kind of agree with what Elon Musk says in many ways that if all of us could live it to 500, it might be like a very miserable life. And the reason I say that, and I kind of agree with Elon, I don't really know where I land right now, but I'm just kind of giving you, this is what I like to do, like Peter Thiel does. I like to give all the points of view and kind of give my middle point because I try and listen to everybody. But Elon says something really interesting. Even if he would live for 500 years, he says the only way to advance society is for people to die. And the reason he argues that is if you look at politics in the U.S., the people who are running the country. I'm not American, but the people who are really old people. Like the people in the Supreme Court, the people in like who are president. I mean, Joe Biden's like what in his like late 70s or something, and these people don't understand the future. They don't understand what Web3 is. They don't understand what an NFT is. They don't understand what the internet is. And we saw that in Facebook's court hearing. I know they're called Meta now, but like Facebook, when Mark Zuckerberg was testifying in the Senate, and they were just like asking the stupidest questions about the internet. That Mark was literally like, do these people like live in a cave? Like, what happened? Like, and it wasn't hard questions. I'm not saying the every needs to be technically sound and understand all this stuff, but just like at a basic level. How are these people supposed to run the country? So I think the challenge is if the life expectancy was 500, for people to change drastically their points of view in the world, people actually need to die because people's point of view just will never change because most of us are closed-minded. I mean, very few of us in the world, and it's just the truth, Thomas, are willing to even have this much of an open-minded conversation. Like just as a funny anecdote, how many podcast guests would be willing to go this deep with you? Like very few people. They'd be like, oh my God, my image, my reputation. Whereas my point of view is like, okay, we're all human beings having experience. Let's just like figure it out. No one's got it. So let's just have a conversation. But most people aren't like that. So because of that, Elon's fear is if it's already bad as it is at the life expectancy at 80, where all these old people are running the country instead of younger, fresh blood with the ideas who are actually energetic, creating stuff. And I don't mean young as in 20. I mean young as in 50. I mean young as in 40. But definitely a lot like 90. Then ideas won't move forward. So yeah, I think that's the challenge, and I don't think it would be a fun living. But what I would like to see is if all of the geniuses of our society could live forever, that'd be cool. But then it would create an unbalance in the world. So I guess you can't really pick. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? So yeah, I guess that's the challenge.
It's a tricky one to navigate. The in terms of if you were able to teach humanity one thing, what would it be?
So I think it would be easy to say something like love, or so there's kind of like two ways of answering that question. One is like based on my skill set, which obviously would be communication, right? Like if everyone could learn communication, I mean, the world would just be a better place, like frankly. Even if people don't want to be keynote speakers, just like communicate with your family, listening to people, hearing perspectives, the world would just be less divisive, period. Because just the fact that we're able to hold this space for each other. Well, if everyone could do that, well, life would just be better, just objectively. But if I could teach any skill, because that's the two ways of approaching that question, if I could teach any skill that I probably aren't equipped to teach, I would probably I would think of it more in terms of like experience rather than skill. So I would like force everyone to go into therapy, which is something I've never needed, by the way. I don't know why. I've just always felt I never need. I still don't. But I think for most, because I just kind of self-reflect on my own with my coaches. But I think most people would benefit a lot from that. Like if people could just sit down with somebody one-on-one and just talk, especially men, I think that would be good. I think that would be good. So it'd be more of an experience, not a skill.
There's a lot of stigma to it, and I think coming to your point, I think it is a beneficial thing. I don't think it should be perceived as a negative thing, because there's a lot of introspection, a lot of learning to be done, right?
100%, yeah.
Is there anything I should have asked you about today?
I mean, you've covered the vision. Usually when somebody asks me that question, I go like the vision, because people don't get what I do with MasterTalk sometimes, Thomas. They kind of just go like, oh, he's like a coach and he's just trying to make money, which is true. I mean, money is important, but like, I mean, there's a bigger play. But you already asked me that question. So is there one thing? I wouldn't say like a question you should have asked me, but I guess one thing that I would share that I often don't, and I rarely do, is like I think that like it's kind of like an original idea I had a few years ago that I'm kind of developing, is I think the easiest way to solve the world's problems is to do just that. Focus on the easiest problems first. Like, so in my head, my utopian world, and how I plan on doing this in my mid-30s, is like if all the smartest people, Thomas, just sat at a table, let's say the 10,000 smartest people in the world, like everybody, we all just sat at a table and we just debated the world's easiest problem and just solved that, problems would get solved a lot quicker. Like, think about gay marriage, right? What I think fascinating about gay marriage is it got solved so quickly. Like, it literally went from like the mid 90s, if you said you were homosexual, like as a context, you would get a lot of scrutiny. Like Ellen DeGeneres almost lost her show over it. But literally 20 years later, like in today's era, like it's perfectly normal. In fact, if you're against it, you would be scrutinized for it, right? Which I think is rightfully so. But what I think is interesting about gay marriage is how quickly it was solved. So the reason I bring that up is I think a lot of us bring too much emotion into the way that we live our life. Now, I'm not saying emotion is a bad thing, but I do believe that if we all just sat down and said, okay, guys, it seems like abortion is a touchy topic. It seems like half of America is pro-life and half of America is pro-choice. But, and I'm not, I'm not picking sides here. I'm just looking at it from a bird's eye view. Okay, well, does that necessarily 50% of the population, let's just use the US as an example, is terrible, hurtful, like gross human beings? I mean, statistically, that's just impossible. We all go to the same restaurants. We all eat the same Big Macs. We all go to the same movies. We all laugh about the same shit. So it's just impossible to assume that one side of abortion is right and the other side is wrong. So what does that lead me to the conclusion? So most people would say in this situation, we got to fight it out. My version of this is let's not fight it out. How about we all just sit down and solve something else together? You guys like clean water for the world? Yeah, everyone agrees. Even the worst human beings on earth would agree with the fact that every human being should have clean water, right? Simple. So how about we all just work together and solve that problem? Whether you're Republican, Democrat, you're purple, you're yellow, let's do that. And the reason I picked, like I looked at all the problems in our society, Tom, the reason I chose communication is because no one was solving it. I really felt I had the talent to do it. But there's another piece to the equation I never talk about, is that no one's going to go against me. No one's going to stand in my way. No one's going to say, Brenden, what you're doing is horrible for the human race. I'm going to use every press PR strategy to ruin your life. No one's going to do that with me. Because whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, you're yellow, you're black, you're white, you're going to support what I do. And that's why my YouTube channel and my following, my business grew so quickly, because nobody disagrees with me. And that wasn't an accident. That was me picking a problem that I knew I could solve, but that everyone would get behind. And that's what I think most of us should do. So let's assume like there's 7,000 or 40,000 problems in the world. Let's just assume that's the number for the purpose of this discussion. If the smartest people just owned one, like in the same way I'm owning communication, like the world would just be like awesome. But most people don't think that way, unfortunately.
I like the conclusion there. The world would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the share, and you've given some great answers to some, shall we say, tricky questions. If people want to know more, want to connect with you, I know you've got your YouTube channel, but where else can they find you?
Absolutely, man. Thanks for this conversation, Tom. This was super fun. Super fun. You should probably tell the other guests though that you're gonna ask this. I love it, but you probably tell the other ones. So I get scared of you. But this is super fun for me. I love this. I need to re-listen to it actually because you asked me a lot of great questions. I need to rethink. So be sure to send me that episode after it's out so I can personally listen to it again. But 2 ways to keep in touch. First one, MasterTalk. Just go to YouTube, type MasterTalk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And then for those who are interested in coaching, for some reason, you still are based on this conversation, go to rockstarcommunicator.com and you'll have access to our free trainings that we do every few weeks over Zoom.
Brenden, thank you for your contribution and being a great guest today.
Hey, likewise, man. It was super fun.